In the limitless bustle of 20th century New York, Conrad Elkins appeared at first glance as unremarkable as any man in an overcoat and city hat. Yet even amid the crowded streets and museums, his presence cut through the ordinary. I, Hugh, a chemist of some modest repute, had long taken pride in discerning a person's origins from their face, bearing or bearing alone. Elkins baffled me utterly. His features were paradoxically pale and delicate, with hair so fine it caught the light like spun silver. Yet the planes of his face carried an ancient power, uncatalogued by any known race or nation. His eyes, large and softly violet, bore depths that hinted at millennia. And his bearing, though modishly tailored, spoke of a man who wished to vanish into anonymity, while simultaneously demanding attention. Our acquaintance grew slowly. I spotted him studying archaic artifacts, inscribed pottery, indistinct metal gears, at the Natural History Museum. He was poring over works by Havelock Ellis, reading physics treatises, consulting biology compendia. He asked piercing questions about cosmic rays and chemistry. He praised Einstein's theories. He spoke of the transmutation of matter, as though casually recalling a school lesson. Each encounter left in me a mix of fascination and frustration. I wanted to know more about this person who seemed both our peer and being apart. After months of quiet courtship, shared afternoons in libraries, polite discussions in my tiny laboratory near Washington Square, Elkins invited me to his modest lodgings. The apartment, too, revealed little. Books in German, French, and Russian piled without order. A few costumed garments, vaguely futuristic. And then came the revelation. "Hugh, I am not a man of your period," he said. "My name is Cronus Alcon. I come from 15,000 AD, the America of the far future, which calls itself Achameria." He described a civilization centuries more advanced than ours, where humans lived 300 to 400 years, mastered atomic transmutation, terraformed climate, and traveled freely among planets. But this utopia teetered on collapse. They faced population imbalance, planetary migrations, and the insidious threat of alien enslaving species, Venusians and Martians. The knowledge of sex determination, lost in the cataclysms of history, was the prize that drove him to this era. More than that, a hope to recover forgotten arts, to understand their origins in the crude machinery and culture of our dawn age. I listened, breathless, and I believed him. His eyes were too resolute, his detailed explanations too convincingly technical. Descriptions of anti-gravitational disks, cosmic ray time vessels, precise synchronizations of Earth's motion. And when he offered me the chance to accompany him back, in identity and in time modestly refashioned, my spirit leapt. We traveled by night to a secret clearing high in the Catskill Mountains, where the anti-gravitational disk, a small metal contraption strapped over the chest, lifted Elkins upwards. He descended its tethered chain to ferry me to the hidden time vessel, a sleek, spindle-shaped craft no longer than a rowboat, and glimmering with future alloy. He supplied me with a tunic and sandals, vaguely classical in appearance, but woven of future fibers, chemical constructs unknown here. He renamed me Huno Pascon, a colonial youth from Pallas, to conceal my provenance. He did too with his own name, from Conrad Elkins to Cronus Alcon. Inside the vessel we sat strapped in sling seats. He raised us above the cliff, engaged the cosmic ray mechanisms, then the atomic disintegration engines for altitude. A hush, a shift into another dimension, a shudder that broke my mind apart into million sparks of being. vessel's interior. Cronus was smiling at me across the console. When the doors opened, we stepped into an atmosphere seasoned with warmth and fragrant with subtleties I could not name. Before us lay the metallic sheen of an aerodrome, where strange craft, both human-like and alien, rested in graceful symmetry. Stone terraces of strangely veined synthetics cut into the hillside. Palm gardens and exotic Baroque flora flourished under a soft subtropical sun. "This is my estate near Jarma," said Cronus, "built on the ruins of New York, far inland now, after climate upheavals and sea level changes." He guided me inside a pavilion of translucent onyx walls, futuristic arches, gem-lit rooms. I met Altus and Oron, cousins of Cronus, and Tra, the stoic Martian overseer, squat and toad-like, but carrying a weight of intellect in his silent eyes. And then, unexpectedly, they were under attack. Venusian slaves, bestial, hair-clad, fork-tailed creatures, charged into the courtyard with stones and clubs. With precision, Cronus and Oron wielded electronic stealth projectors. Tra hurled heavy stones. Against this flood of brute force, human and Martian discipline prevailed, injuring many, routing the rest. Altus fell under a thrown rock, blood pouring from a scalp wound. Cronus knelt beside him inside the house and used his green osprey, a surgical marvel, to heal bone, flesh, and spirit in moments. He rose, haunted by grief and resolve. The Venusian numbers grow. Martians help them covertly, we suspect. Sabotage, plagues, they'll not stop here. So began my immersion in Acamarian society. I learned their language, studied their science, beheld atomic transmutation, witnessed their mastery of climate and architecture. They were a race at ease, striving for art, philosophy, knowledge, yet languid, decadent, teetering on the brink of collapse. Disaster struck Jarma soon after, the Black Rot. A microbial plague, perhaps smuggled from Venus, made synthetic stone and metal dust dissolve in black powder, spreading over miles with silent terrors. At a conclave of scientists in a citywide assembly, inspired by my passing remark, Cronus proposed using radium as a fine aerial spray to arrest the plague. The spellbound council accepted. Teams embarked with portable disintegrators, ionic radium vaporizers, and surrounded the afflicted zones. Within hours, like a miracle, the Black Rot halted. The city breathed relief. I had, in a humble role, helped avert catastrophe. For several days, I lived in a house for visiting dignitaries. Marble baths, floating music, sumptuous meals, attendants who obeyed without speaking, subtle wonders masked by grace and restraint. I realized that despite their mastery of matter and life, the men of 15,000 AD cared more for beauty, tranquility, and knowledge than power. Yet there was rigidity under the surface. Venturing alone among the streets and gardens, and even into the Martian quarter, I encountered beauty shaped by alien logic, aspherical greenhouses, intoxicating atmospheres of Nultan, dreamlike architecture. I felt both mesmerized and estranged. The scarcity of women, their mechanical stillness amid polyandrous structures, gave the city the pall of a civilization without myth or passion, energetic but sterile. One evening, I strolled from my lodgings toward the Martian quarter. In the muted twilight among palms and wandering paths, I sensed eyes watching. Then a group of Venusian slaves burst from the undergrowth. I fought with bare hands, landing one solid punch, but was blinded by sticks and claws. Then everything went black. When I awoke, had lit a coals bed atop a giant iron tray. We were to be their meal. Joss whispered that the slaves had learned to communicate secretly, and that the Martians had helped smuggle weapons and plagues. The fruit of human arrogance was about to be eaten by the beast within. He described how the coals glowed. I shut my eyes against pain. He explained he had used a nocturnal televising scanner to track my path as soon as I failed to return. He'd gathered a rescue force and flown directly into harm's way. My heart pounded with gratitude and horror at how close the world had come to succumbing to its own negligence. The next days brought grim tidings. Venusian slaves rose in open revolt across continents. Martian toxins, Venusian insect swarms, microbial plagues, black rot, and more ravaged Earth. Heat rays and zero-ray frost guns claimed lives. Martian ambushes destroyed human embassies on Mars. The Venusians, once slaves, advanced confidently. The Martians responded from their hidden enclaves. In the cities, scientists scrambled in calm urgency. Laboratories began working non-stop. But a terrifying new plague arose. The Yellow Death, a microscopic airborne algae from Venus that turned breathable air into a deadly saffron choker. It killed slowly and painfully, suffocated humans, but left aliens unharmed. A great evacuation, a planet-wide trek northward, became imperative. Cities began to abandon temperate zones for polar enclaves, buried in snow, fortified with synthetic domes and atomically powered factories. But the cold held its limits of human tolerance. Cronus concluded that humanity's final refuge lay not on Earth, but in the colonized asteroids, spaceborne havens shaped by centuries of interplanetary engineering. Before that final escape, we had one task: to recover the time vessel, hidden now in Cronus's aerodrome, his countryside estate. We flew south in atomic airships to the estate. The plantations lay wrecked, houses burned. Venusian madness had stalked the fields. We swooped to an isolated aerodrome in time to catch a band of slaves attempting to burn or damage the vessels. Cronus guided the ship through them. Altus and I fired heat ray projectors. A swift aerial sweep left only 3 survivors, and we recovered the time machine inside. Their footprints scorched across the earth, but we reclaimed our prize. That act felt small against the planetary crisis, but deeply solemn. Far in the north, preparations were underway. Arctic cities rose in smoke and steel. All interplanetary vessels bore human refugees to orbit, to the asteroids, to the hope of rebuilding. And the Martians began to enslave the Venusians in turn, wielding the zero ray and their chemical toxins. The day of departure dawned solemn and infinitely sad. On the silver runway of the auroral base, I stood with Cronus beside the time vessel. Surrounding us across the Arctic ice, docked in the sky, soared ragged lungs, sweet and wholly alive.